As others have mentioned, we began the planning for this conference in earnest, and it began sometime last spring. One of the first conversations was to determine the theme, building together, curating tomorrow. It's an inherently optimistic and forward-looking theme that embraces the spirit of both of our organizations. And yet, with all that has transpired since we established that theme, it seems pretty hard for me to reconcile those words with the national zeitgeist. As it happens, it was exactly 4 years ago today. This very day, NOA was closing the final day of our virtual conference when dark images and unimaginable scenes of violence began to emerge from our nation's capital. 4 years to this day, right? And now once again, we find ourselves navigating a tomorrow where support for the arts and education may not be a given, where the value of creative expression may be questioned, permissible viewpoints, even identities restricted. Funding and policies might well reflect a narrower vision of cultural significance or relevance. With all the divisive rhetoric and calls to tear it all down that we hear with regularity in the political discourse, how can we even think about building anything together? Well, this is not the first time that the arts have faced adversity. And in challenging times, creativity has often been a force for transformation, even for resistance. Opera and the expression of the human voice, unique among all of the arts, have that unique ability to tell stories that humanize the struggles of our time, bringing light to shadows and hope to despair. My challenge to us all during these next 3 days is to recenter ourselves and our work, and to consider how we will each rise to the challenge that is posed by our conference theme. When we talk about togetherness, it's a fundamental human need, and it's necessary for a functioning society. As practitioners, creators, scholars, and educators in all of our art forms, collaboration is in our DNA. And our very presence in this room is a physical manifestation of our two great organizations coming together to bring us all together. We curate that which we wish to preserve. But curation requires more of us than simple preservation. Think samples in formaldehyde and artifacts under glass. Curation requires active decision-making about what elements and practices from our inherited past should be continued. It requires a thoughtfulness and consideration in our approach and the perspective that we bring. Curation requires active cultivation of new works and active work to discern voices and stories that have been overlooked or neglected. The wonderful thing about curation in our art form is that the responsibility doesn't lie with any sole authority or entity or gatekeeper. As we cultivate the next generation, we must seek to empower them to join in the curation with us. We all are participants by the choices that we make. Tomorrow is inherently forward-looking, a focus on the future of our art form, what it can become, what we can do to cultivate that next generation who will join in this endeavor. When we say building and curating, that ing suggests an ongoing and an iterative process. The work is never completed. So, tomorrow may seem uncertain, maybe daunting, but as artists, curators, and dreamers, we hold the tools to shape it. Let us rise above the division and despair of our times to build that future where opera speaks to our common humanity as a means for connection and as a sanctuary for expression. Let's enjoy this conference together. Thank you.